Now, my story started quite differently to what most people would expect from what they know of me and what I went on to do. Because as a young girl, which was probably not that many years ago, I started sailing and was terrified of it. I was a quiet, shy girl. This is me here in the pink pants. Was terrified of everything. Didn't like getting out in the water, going fast, climbing trees, any of those adventurous things you'd expect from a girl who went on to sail around the world. But my family were doing it. My sister, who's right in the thick of it there, was a natural sailor, and of course everyone wants to be like their older sister. So I would spend my weekends at the yacht club. My family actually lived on a boat for a few years as well. And I had these amazing parents who had this incredible idea that they'd tell me and my siblings that we could do anything we believed, anything we set our minds to. And boy, did they kind of shoot themselves in the foot a little bit. Didn't quite realise how far I'd stretched that to do anything. But nothing really changed for me in terms of being that really quiet, timid young girl until Mum read me a book. And she'd read to me all the time because I'm also terribly dyslexic and struggled with reading for the first few years there. And she'd read to me all the time. And this particular book she read me was Jesse Martin's story. Young Victorian guy you might not have heard of, sailed around the world aged 18. And the thing that struck me about his book was realising that he'd done this incredible thing, but he was also just an ordinary guy. He was the guy who could have lived next door, and look what he'd achieved. And that just started me thinking, well, if he's ordinary, he can do that. What is it that I can do? So I decided, told rather than asked Mum and Dad what I wanted to do, and then was the big how. How do you sail around the world as a 16-year-old? What have you got to do? What are the goals you've got to tick off along the way? Well, of course, there was a lot of experience that had to be gained, sailing up into the Pacific, out up and down the coast, down to the subantarctic ocean, meeting a lot of incredible people along the way who did have that experience and those years of knowledge that could help me with the few less years that I had on my side. So I learned to see survival, first aid courses, all sorts of things, fixing up engines, stitching up sails, celestial navigation, which is navigating by the stars. Of course, I got out there and turned on the GPS, but all of these things were useful and important to know. And as I said, most importantly, this team of people that started coming together around me. Incredibly, one of those people actually brought me a boat to use for the voyage, and a small group of sponsors started building up as well, which was, again, incredible when you think about me as a 14, 15-year-old girl ringing up the heads of companies and asking them to support such a voyage. You can understand, I certainly can now and then understand how a lot of people were concerned about what I was doing. And it's quite interesting what I knew then and what I've learnt since about risk. I think the first big thing a lot of people don't realise about risk is that we really fear the unknown. And the reality is, for most people, I don't know about you guys, but being completely in the middle of the ocean by yourself as a 16-year-old is a huge, big unknown. And for that reason, the perceived risk is much greater than for someone who actually is familiar and comfortable in that environment, as crazy as that may be. The other thing about risk is that we forget that there's that risk in doing nothing as well. It was risky, it was an adventure, what I did, but equally maybe sitting on the couch for 8 months may have also been quite bad for me as well. I think it was one of my uncles who first introduced me to a risk management document, which was quite interesting to learn about so young. And I did start weighing up these risks with this incredible team of people who were surrounding me at this point. There were risks that we could manage with backup plan upon backup plan, and then there were others, like the threat of pirates, that we just didn't want to have to deal with. Modern day pirates are a real issue, and for me that was just not a position I wanted to put myself in, so I had to take a way around the world that completely took me clear of those dangers. The other thing about this group of people that were supporting me at this point was that they were incredibly dedicated. A lot of them, they were all volunteers. We actually put an ad in a yachting magazine at one point asking for help. They came from around the country. I didn't expect anyone to respond at all to come and help. And I did get to the point where I was actually a bit troubled by how I was possibly going to thank them enough for what they were doing, because I was working them sun up, sun down, no days off a week. I'd get up every day and write this long list of things that had to be done and sort of drive everyone till they were done. And I did become a bit concerned about how I was going to thank them for what they were doing. Luckily, one of them sat me down and told me I was looking at it completely the wrong way. It wasn't about ever being able to thank them enough for what they were doing. It was about them being part of this voyage with me, sharing it with me. It was theirs as much as it was mine. I say we a lot, and you might find that odd for a solo voyage around the world, but that's the reality. I was pretty good mates with the boat as well, but it was a much bigger team of people who got me around the world. Just before I went to set off, does everyone remember what happened next? Hopefully not. Yeah, a bit of fuss about that at the time. First night out to sea on a sea trial, after all of this work to the boat and I'm ready to go, I ran smack bang into the middle of a 63,000-tonne container ship, the biggest ship going around the ocean. And here's what I did just to prove to the world that I'm ready to sail around it. Obviously highly embarrassing, terrifying, a lot of damage to the boat. The interesting thing is, wouldn't wish that upon my worst enemy, but boy did it happen for a reason. Obviously I learned from it. Quite simply, don't hit ships. Fix the equipment on board that should have told me there was a ship in the area. But more than that, I actually came away from that incident, quite strangely, with a lot more confidence. That was really, for me, a big beginning, because after that night, I realised my head did exactly what it was meant to. It clicked into gear. I realised that I actually did have the mental strength I needed to take on the situations to come at sea, and walked away from that with more confidence, right as the rest of the world had less confidence in me. Finally set off. That was a relief to finally set off from Sydney Harbour. And my first leg was out across the Pacific Ocean, up to the equator there, and then further down south across the rest of the Pacific. Now, the whole way across the Pacific Ocean, I tried quite hard at fishing because obviously fresh food was in pretty short supply after a few months, and it would have been lovely. The entire way around the world, I only caught one fish, and that was caught in those first few months in the Pacific there. Not a great achievement, that one. So further south in the Pacific Ocean there is actually what we call Point Nemo, and that's the point furthest anywhere on Earth from land, and that's where I spent Christmas. I sailed through that point the day before Christmas, which is a very unique way to spend it. Then rounded South America, Cape Horn, as we call it, which is not on the picture there, but Antarctica is just below it. So it's a miserable place. It's a notorious place to be, but also quite an incredible thing to make it there. And despite the fearsome reputation of Cape Horn, it was actually further on from there and up in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean that I struck a really nasty storm. So I got a forecast for a storm. I knew it was going to be bad, but that night it got a lot worse than was forecast. I experienced winds that were like that of a cyclone and waves that were sort of 10 metres plus, which is many, many times the height of this ceiling, towering above my little boat. It kept getting worse. As I said, the winds had hit those sort of cyclone-like strengths before my wind instruments were knocked off the top of the mast by a knockdown. And the knockdown is when the boat is rolled upside down by a big wave. But it wasn't the first or the second of these knockdowns that had me particularly worried. It was the third, because if you can imagine, in the middle of the night, and these things always seem to happen in the middle of the night, it's dark, there's water down below, things being thrown around, and I heard another one of these waves coming. You can hear them. It's this huge, big roaring noise, terrifying, like the roar of waves at a beach, but much, much worse. So I remember hearing that and then having to walk up the ceiling, up the walls, I should say, to stand on the ceiling, then thrown like we're a toy into the trough of the next wave. The power of that wave and the way it forced the boat underwater is just incredible, awe-inspiring, amazing to see waves like that, but obviously very, very terrifying. And it has taken me quite a number of years to sort of become comfortable talking about just how bad the moments and even hours after that particular wave were, because I just couldn't comprehend how the boat could survive that and how we would survive if there was another wave like that. Now, I've learned a lot about fear through my own experiences, but also through the experiences of others. A lot of incredible sports people who have had amazing opportunities for them to open up about fear with, and other adventurers and all sorts of people. And they tell you a lot of things, like the long list of whys you need to be able to tell yourself, why you're doing this. For me, in that moment, I had to reach for a why that was more than myself, which turns out is quite common with those career-defining moments for sports people and those really hair-raising moments for adventurers. It's very important on those particularly tough days to reach for something that's more than yourself. I had all my preparation in that risk management to fall back on, and I found that very helpful as well, having faith in that. But really, as I say here in these words, it's a choice. How did I get from being that scared little girl to dealing with that situation? Really, you have to choose. That's really quite simple. Then you have to pretend a whole lot and fake it, and eventually actually find that strength in that situation. Of course, there were a lot of fun, beautiful moments along the way as well. A lot of the time, those huge waves in the Southern Ocean are just beautiful. Or these huge, big, graceful birds, these albatross in the Southern Ocean, sometimes 3 meters long, incredibly beautiful to watch soar around the boat. Dolphins as far as the eye can see, out to the horizon, leaping out of the water. Or in one instance, it was actually so perfectly calm that the stars reflected like it was a mirror in the water, and we couldn't really tell where the sky stopped and where the water began. A really, really beautiful experience. Kind of frustrating to not be going anywhere without any wind as well. Finally, the rest of the way around the world and got back to under Australia. And the day I got home, I can't really explain, it's not easy to explain how overwhelming it was. Because the entire way around the world had been non-stop. I hadn't seen another person. I'd seen land 3 or 4 times in the distance. That was it. So to get back and to have so many people in Sydney Harbour to meet me, so many boats, the colours, the smells, the noises, all incredibly vivid, a lot to take in. People's faces for me were they stood out. It was like I was looking at aliens, or it was so unfamiliar, everything I was experiencing. So very overwhelming. The Prime Minister at the time, Kevin Rudd, was also there to meet me, which was incredible considering I was running quite late on the day. And he stood up and made this amazing speech about how I was a hero. And you can see the words here, how I stood up and said I disagree with him. Very cheeky after I'd kept him waiting. And at the time there was this awkward, not awkward, but a moment of applause after I'd said that first line that I disagree, before I could finish and go on to say that I disagree because... very cheeky, but something I very much wanted to get across at the time. From that day, which is nearly 6 years ago now, the first question everyone asks is, what's next? What are you going to do to better that, is what I very often hear. And for me, I had to finish school, get my driver's licence, a few things to tick off there. But I did want to learn to sail a bit faster, because my mates still give me a hard time about how slowly I sailed around the world. So the way we did that was in the Sydney Hobart, our sort of famous or notorious offshore race with a youth team of 10, 6 guys, 4 girls, evened up the gender inequality with a pink boat again. And we took it very seriously, in much the same way that goal of sailing around the world was handled by going, well, what have we got to do to make it and get that result we want? We worked backwards, took over a year to come together, 3 months full-time training. And through that experience, I learned very fast. I was a steep learning curve coming from a solo sailor to a leader of a team as well, that the days we sailed well, where we worked together, they were very powerful. We worked to get the best out of each other. The days we didn't get along were disastrous sailing-wise, performance-wise. The Sydney Hobart itself is a very tough few days. It's a lot shorter than around the world, but much tougher in a lot of ways. That constant pressure to perform, but also a lot of the time when we were sleeping, it was actually on the side of the boat with your legs over there, waves dumping over you. Not a pleasant few days, but it did give us that little edge that we needed, and we got second place and actually beat our coaches as well, who were racing against us, which was probably the more important result for us at the time. Other than that, there have been a lot of incredible experiences. For a girl who ran away from school for a few years there, I have come to really enjoy studying. I finished undergraduate and now well into my MBA as well, a challenge that I'm really enjoying. And I suppose that's been the important thing for me, is that I have had to stay challenged. I do like to keep pushing myself. Possibly not in the huge, big, dramatic, media-worthy ways that some people would like me to, but in a way that would have almost been the easy thing to do, to sail around the world backwards or sail off to the moon. I've had to put myself in situations where I've been completely out of my comfort zone, again, to keep myself challenged. The year I spent as Young Australian of the Year was incredibly humbling. The people I met and actually won the award over were these incredibly generous people who had dedicated their lives to helping other people, and here was me who'd won the award over them. So very humbling and quite scary, that experience, which also led me to get involved with quite a number of charities and my role with the United Nations World Food Programme, which has taken me to Jordan and Lebanon and Laos, and this is a photo here from Jordan and the refugee camps last year. An experience that of course was very upsetting, But the funny thing about that was that I walked away feeling very inspired, which is not what I was expecting at all, because there's people over there, particularly women, who are making the best of that incredibly tough and horrible situation. And that just makes me go every single day back here, well, if I'm not going to make the best of everything I've got at my fingertips back here. But over the last few years, I suppose I've also become a little cynical. Maybe I'm getting old. I'm getting a little sick of all these inspiring speeches and books and Instagram feeds full of inspiring quotes, because all of these things are great, but I think far too often we actually forget that they're also completely useless unless we actually take that action in those first few steps. And that is certainly important, because in my experience, living these dreams is a lot more fun than just dreaming about them. So thank you very much. A huge congratulations to everyone here this evening. It's a pleasure to be along, to be part of it, and I look forward to my own graduation on the other side, hopefully not too far away. Thank you again.